They are in the streets marching. Right at this very instant, the women of Venezuela are marching for the peace of our country. As for me, personally, I say this: those who threaten me, my destiny is not decided by them. It is decided only by God. That is my answer. So, Venezuelan men and women, let us continue to work diligently so that by the conclusion of this year, 2026, we can proudly declare that we have fulfilled our duty as a nation in national unity, and this is precisely what the President has designated as the admirable challenge for 2026. The Venezuela that will not surrender, the Venezuela that stands in active resistance, and the Venezuela, a noble people, a people of peace, seeking its very own path. And in Venezuela, a nation that has unequivocally shown the entire world what we are truly made of, that we have, without a doubt, grown significantly in our collective strength and fortitude, that we have also matured and developed spiritually, enabling us to face and overcome all the immense challenges, the aggressions, and indeed every single threat that comes our way. We, the Venezuelan people, are a nation that does not surrender, that does not give up, and we are standing here, governing alongside our people. The government of Venezuela is the sole authority in our country, and no one else. There are absolutely no external agents that govern Venezuela. This is Venezuela, our own sovereign nation. It is its legitimate and constitutionally established government. It represents the consolidated and firmly established popular power. And today, at this very moment, we are precisely conducting a comprehensive assessment. President Maduro declared before a tribunal that he is a prisoner of war, and they proclaim themselves for what they truly are: innocent, decent people whose diplomatic immunity as a head of state was unjustly and unfairly violated. And so, they have completely and utterly violated international laws and the laws of Venezuela's. From here, we extend our recognition to the martyrs, to those who offered their lives in the defense of Venezuela against this criminal attack, which also had an outcome. Absolutely illegal, a violation and a complete breach of international legality, as is the kidnapping of our President Nicolás Maduro and of the first combatant, the First Lady of Venezuela, Cilia Flores.
January 6th, 2026. 3 days after what the Venezuelan government calls the terrible military aggression against their homeland. 3 days after U.S. forces captured President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. 3 days after the world changed, acting President Delcy Rodríguez addressed the Venezuelan people and the world with a message of defiance, resilience, and determination. The Venezuelan people, she declared, remain firm. They remain active. They are ready to defend their homeland. This is what she said. Rodríguez began by acknowledging the gravity of what had occurred. After the terrible military aggression of which our beloved homeland Venezuela was a victim, she said, by the government of the United States, the Venezuelan people remain firm. They remain active to defend our homeland. She offered recognition to those who lost their lives. From here, our recognition to the martyrs, to those who offered their lives in the defense of Venezuela against this criminal attack. The attack, she said, had an outcome that was absolutely illegal, violatory, and breaking of international legality. That outcome, the kidnapping of our President Nicolás Maduro and of the first combatant, First Lady of Venezuela, Cilia Flores. Rodríguez referenced Maduro's court appearance in New York the previous day. Yesterday, President Maduro declared before a tribunal that he is a prisoner of war, she said. And they declared themselves as what they are: innocent, decent people, whose immunity protection as head of state was unjustly violated. International laws and the laws of Venezuela were completely violated. The characterization of Maduro as a prisoner of war rather than a criminal defendant is significant. It frames the conflict not as a law enforcement action, as the United States claims, but as an act of war between nations. And under international law, prisoners of war have specific protections that criminal defendants do not. Rodríguez acknowledged that Venezuela faces difficult times ahead. Venezuela is right now on a painful path, she said. Painful because of the aggression it suffered. unprecedented in our history, unprecedented in the history of South America. An aggression of this nature. She was making a historical claim that no South American nation has ever experienced what Venezuela experienced on January 3, 2026. The capture of a sitting head of state by a foreign military power, the bombing of a sovereign nation's territory, the forcible extraction of a president from his own country. If true, it would indeed be unprecedented in the modern history of the continent. But despite the pain, Rodríguez said, the Venezuelan people are mobilizing. The Venezuelan people are active. They are in the streets, marching. Right at this moment, the women of Venezuela are marching for the peace of our country. Marching, asking for the freedom of our heroes, President Maduro and the first combatant. She emphasized Venezuelan resolve. We are a people that does not surrender, the Venezuelan people. We are a people that does not give up, that does not surrender. And we are here, governing alongside the people. This was Rodríguez's central message, a direct response to Donald Trump's statement that the United States would run Venezuela after the operation. The government of Venezuela rules in our country, she declared. No one else? There is no external agent that governs Venezuela. It is Venezuela. It is its constitutional government. It is the consolidated popular power. The message was unmistakable. Despite Trump's claims, despite Maduro's capture, despite the military operation, the Venezuelan government remains in control. Whether that claim reflects reality on the ground is another question entirely. But for Rodríguez, asserting continued sovereignty was essential. Rodríguez's authority to make these claims comes from her role as acting president. Following Maduro's capture, she was sworn in before the National Assembly. The ceremony was attended by Jorge Rodríguez, president of the National Assembly, by Diosdado Cabello, the powerful interior minister, by the entire civilian and military leadership of the Bolivarian government. In her oath, Rodríguez made clear, there is one president in this country, and his name is Nicolás Maduro Moros. She does not claim to replace Maduro. She claims to govern in his name, in his absence, until his return. This legal framework is important. By maintaining that Maduro remains the legitimate president, merely temporarily absent, the Venezuelan government rejects any notion of regime change. The contrast with Washington's position could not be starker. Donald Trump has stated openly that his administration will run Venezuela following the operation. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been designated to coordinate what Trump calls a transition process. American officials have said U.S. oil companies will take control of Venezuela's energy sector. Trump has threatened acting President Rodríguez directly, warning she will pay a very big price if she fails to cooperate. Rodríguez has rejected all of this as barbarism. For her, these are not the words of a legitimate government pursuing law enforcement. These are the words of an imperial power seeking to impose its will on a sovereign nation. In one of her most striking statements, Rodríguez addressed the threats against her personally. Those who threaten me, I tell them, my fate is not decided by anyone but God. That is my response. It was a declaration of fearlessness and of faith. Rodríguez was signaling that she will not be intimidated, that she will not flee, that she will not negotiate under duress. Whatever happens to her, arrest, prosecution, worse, she has placed her fate in divine hands. For her supporters, it is a statement of courage and conviction. For her critics, it may be bravado in the face of overwhelming American military power. Either way, it sets the tone for what promises to be a prolonged confrontation. Let us review what Rodríguez has said about the events of January 3rd. Just hours after the American attack, which included bombing raids on Caracas and other states, Rodríguez appeared on national television. She denounced what she called a military aggression without precedent by the United States. She said the attack culminated in the illegal kidnapping of Nicolás Maduro and the First Lady. She claimed the Venezuelan government had warned of an operation under false excuses and false pretexts. The true objective, she said, was regime change, to capture Venezuela's energy, mineral, and natural resources. She demanded the immediate release of Maduro and Celia Flores. She called them heroes. And she asked the international community to recognize that this was a violation of international law and of the immunity of a head of state. Throughout her statements, Rodríguez has emphasized Venezuelan sovereignty and independence. Venezuela will never be a colony of anyone, she has declared. She has framed the current moment as a wonderful stage of defense of national independence. She has called repeatedly for calm and unity among the Venezuelan people. She has asked that the police, military, and popular fusion become one single body to defend sovereignty. The language is deliberately evocative of Venezuela's independence struggle against Spanish colonialism in the 19th century. Rodríguez is positioning the current conflict as the latest chapter in a centuries-long fight for Venezuelan self-determination. Remarkably, in the midst of this crisis, Rodríguez dedicated significant time to economic matters. On January 6th, the same day she addressed the military aggression, she presented a report on Venezuela's agricultural sector. The numbers she cited were striking. The agricultural food sector, she said, grew 8.12% in 2025. The vegetable sector closed with 10.37% growth and contribution to GDP. The agricultural livestock sector grew 9%. The meat sector grew 10.21%. The fishing and aquaculture sector grew 5%. These are extraordinary numbers, Rodríguez declared. Rodríguez emphasized food security. Venezuela, she said, has achieved full supply of the country. Food reserves now stand at 111 days, the highest in 20 years. For a country that has faced severe food shortages in recent years, shortages that drove millions to flee, these claims are significant. Whether the numbers are accurate is difficult to verify independently, but the message Rodríguez is sending is clear. Despite American sanctions, despite the blockade, despite the military attack, Venezuela is feeding its people. The economic war, in her telling, has failed. Rodríguez announced the installation of a new agricultural, industrial, and communal state command. The body is headed by the new Vice President of Economy, Calixto Ortega. It includes ministers of economy and finance, industry, national commerce, fishing and aquaculture, food, agriculture and land, and communes. The command, Rodríguez explained, is fusing two economic motors, the agricultural motor and the communal motor. For 2026, the plan calls for 200,000 hectares of communal production. The crops include mung beans, soybeans, coffee, rice, corn, and livestock. The goal, she said, is to save foreign currency in the face of the economic blockade. Rodríguez outlined what she called the PAE cycle: produce, supply, export. First, guaranteed production. Second, guaranteed full supply for the Venezuelan people. Third, export products to the Caribbean, Latin America, South America, and Central America. This is the goal, she said, and this is what President Maduro has called the Admirable Challenge 2026. The strategy positions Venezuela not merely as surviving the American blockade, but as thriving despite it. And not merely as self-sufficient, but as a potential food exporter to the region. Rodríguez's economic presentation was not separate from her political message. It was integral to it. The Venezuela that does not surrender, she said, the Venezuela that is in active resistance. And Venezuela, a noble people, a people of peace, that seeks its own path. This is the Venezuela that has shown the world what we are made of. That we have grown in strength, that we have grown spiritually to face the challenges, the aggressions, the threats. The economic numbers, whatever their accuracy, serve a political purpose. They demonstrate, in Rodríguez's telling, that Venezuela's model works, that resistance is viable, that the Bolivarian project is succeeding. Rodríguez cited international validation for Venezuela's economic performance. ACLAC projects growth for this year for our Venezuela, she said. ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, is a United Nations body. If ECLAC is indeed projecting growth for Venezuela in 2026, it would represent a significant endorsement of the country's economic trajectory. Rodríguez used this to reinforce her message. Venezuela is not a failed state. It is not collapsing. It is growing. And the American attack, she implied, was motivated precisely by this success. Rodríguez's economic messaging did not begin on January 6th. In November and December 2025, before the American attack, she had given multiple addresses highlighting economic performance. She spoke of economic growth, victory over the blockade. She said, Venezuela does not stop. She highlighted 8.71% GDP growth in the third quarter of 2025. She emphasized more than 20 consecutive quarters of growth. She pointed to the rise of the non-oil sector, productive diversification, and advances in food sovereignty. "No blockade can defeat an organized people," she declared. In Rodríguez's framing, the American attack was not random. It was a response to Venezuelan success. The aggression of the United States would be a response to the success of the strategy of economic resistance and the consolidation of a sovereign model, according to her reading. In other words, Venezuela was winning, the economic war was failing, so Washington escalated to military force. This narrative serves multiple purposes. It validates the Bolivarian economic model. It positions the attack as proof of that model's success. And it frames resistance as not merely political, but economically rational. Rodríguez has been explicit about what she considers the legal violations committed by the United States. The military operation, she says, violates a basic principle of international law, not using force to impose political or territorial demands. She accuses Washington of state narco-terrorism, using the pretext of combating drug trafficking to achieve political objectives. The true objective, she maintains, is to guarantee control over Venezuelan strategic resources and consolidate regime change favorable to American interests and regional allies. She has also referenced Trump's threats against Colombia, using them to argue that a stage of threat for the entire region has opened. Throughout the crisis, Rodríguez has emphasized national unity. She has called repeatedly for calm and unity among Venezuelans. She has asked that the police, military, and popular fusion become one single body. She has said she will not rest for 1 minute to guarantee peace. The message is directed at multiple audiences. To ordinary Venezuelans, remain calm, stay united, trust your government. To the military and police, stand firm, do not waver, do not defect. To the international community, Venezuela is stable, its government is functioning, there is no chaos. Despite serving as acting president, Rodríguez has been careful to maintain Maduro's primacy. "There is one president in this country," she has said, "and his name is Nicolás Maduro Moros." She does not claim the presidency for herself. She claims to exercise it temporarily in Maduro's name, pending his return. This framing has important implications. It means the Venezuelan government does not accept that Maduro has been removed from power. It means they do not accept the legitimacy of his detention. It means they expect him to return and resume the presidency. Whether that expectation is realistic is another matter. But legally and symbolically, Rodríguez is keeping Maduro's seat warm rather than claiming it for herself. Donald Trump has not been subtle about his expectations for Rodríguez. He has warned that she will pay a very big price if she fails to cooperate with American demands. The nature of that price has not been specified, but given what happened to Maduro, the threat carries obvious weight. Rodríguez could face sanctions, asset freezes, criminal indictments, or even the same fate as her predecessor, capture by American forces. Her response has been defiant. "My fate is decided only by God." She has not indicated any willingness to cooperate with American demands. She has not suggested she will negotiate a transition. She has positioned herself as a leader prepared to resist, whatever the personal cost. On January 6th, as Rodríguez spoke, Venezuelan women were marching. "Right at this moment, the women of Venezuela are marching for the peace of our country," she said. "Marching, asking for the freedom of our heroes, President Maduro and the first combatant." The mobilization of women specifically is significant. It connects to a long tradition of women's political activism in Venezuela. It presents a human face to the resistance, mothers, daughters, sisters demanding peace and the return of their leaders. And it demonstrates that the government retains the capacity to mobilize its supporters, even in crisis. The international response to the American operation has been divided. Russia has condemned it as armed aggression and international banditry. China has expressed deep shock at Washington's bullying behavior. South Africa has demanded Maduro's release and called for UN Security Council action. BRICS nations and the Global South have largely condemned the operation. However, Western nations have been more cautious. The European Union called for international law to be respected, but avoided directly condemning the United States. This split reflects the broader geopolitical divide that the Venezuela crisis has exposed. The situation remains fluid and unpredictable. Maduro sits in a Brooklyn detention center, facing trial on drug trafficking charges. His next court date is March 17th. Rodríguez governs from Caracas, claiming full authority over Venezuelan territory. Trump has said the United States will run Venezuela until a transition is complete. The Venezuelan military, at least publicly, remains loyal to the Bolivarian government. Protests and counter-protests continue in Venezuelan streets. The international community remains divided, and the threat of further American military action hangs over everything. Rodríguez concluded her January 6th address with a call to action. Venezuelans, let us keep working, so that this 2026 we can say at the close, we have fulfilled as a country and national union. We Venezuelans have fulfilled. All the productive sectors have fulfilled. Our people and our homeland. It was a message of determination and continuity. Despite the attack, despite Maduro's capture, despite Trump's threats, Venezuela, in Rodríguez's telling, will continue. The Bolivarian project will continue. The resistance will continue. The Venezuela that does not surrender, she said. The Venezuela that is in active resistance. A noble people, a people of peace, that seeks its own path. Whether that path leads to liberation or confrontation, only time will tell. But for now, Delcy Rodríguez has made her position clear. She will not surrender, she will not cooperate, she will govern. And her fate, she says, is in God's hands alone.